Hello, this is the Stories Beside channel. I release videos every day for you. Subscribe and click the bell. But it was in the third year that the guy realized that this was his true love. Young people met at a disco in honor of the initiation into students. It all started with the fact that the girl invited Michael to a white dance. "Do you mind?" she asked cheerfully. The question was obviously rhetorical, and it was asked, it seems, with one single purpose: to make sure of his own irresistibility. And yet there would hardly be a guy in the whole institute who objected to this slender, long-legged brunette with huge, slightly slanted golden brown eyes, plump sensual lips, and straight shiny hair down to her waist. Michael nodded his head with a smile, and the young people twirled in a dance. The girl smiled enigmatically, and in the middle of the song she suddenly pressed herself against Michael as closely as if they had known each other for 1,000 years. And the relationship between them was the closest that could be between a boy and a girl. He was embarrassed and tried to pull away. "I'm sorry," the girl whispered. "I just seemed to lose my head," and pulled away. Michael was discouraged. This dark-skinned beauty had lost her head to him. No, he wasn't ugly, fat, slouchy, lame, or out for baldness. But for a strange girl, and even such a gorgeous girl, to lose her head so much that she seemed to be ready for anything. In general, April from Nice, who behaved in this way, seemed Michael available. But why not flirt? "It's no big deal," he whispered back. "It's even flattering. It's also so intriguing. I'm dancing with a girl. She's snuggling up to me, and I don't even know her name. And you're sure you want to know it?" The beautiful girl grinned, and that grin made Michael hot. It would be nice to tease her. "What then?" "My name is Kelly, and I'm Michael." "Oh, it's official." She jokingly rolled her eyes. "But it's still a pleasure." "You too." The slow dance ended, giving way to a rousing tune. But Michael and Kelly kept spinning. They were being pushed. And one overly agile dancer, a tall, long-haired guy in a brightly colored t-shirt and tight jeans, managed to knock a couple off their feet. And a couple seconds later, he swung his long arms awkwardly, plopping down on top of them. "Sorry, guys, I got carried away." "It's okay," Michael replied, wiping his bruised thigh and offering a hand to Kelly. "Wow," she laughed. "It's called dancing till you drop." "Yeah," sneered the culprit. "But you'll excuse that again." The young man left, and Kelly offered to sit in the lobby. "I have a headache," she complained. Michael nodded, suspecting that there was no headache at all. Kelly clearly wanted to get to know him better. "Don't flatter yourself with irony," Michael thought. "You're quite the ladies' man." But there was genuine interest in the brunette's eyes, and the guy felt that he was not flattering himself. That's right. What was he, Michael? Matthew's worse than the other guys. "I guess you got in this year?" he asked. "I've just never seen you here before." Kelly smiled at that. "And you are?" "I'm in the third faculty. Hospitality business." "No kidding." "It's just that I got into hospitality too. Now I'll know who to call for help." "I hope I can count on it," the girl asked flirtatiously. "But of course," grinned Michael, suddenly feeling experienced, seduced. And it didn't matter that it didn't correspond to reality. Apparently, these things happen to themselves. He also had the unfortunate thought that Kelly looked a little older than a freshman was supposed to. "What's old?" she asked with a chuckle. Michael winked, as if his thoughts were being eavesdropped on. "But why the awkwardness?" mumbled the boy. "Do you look okay?" "You're an idiot." "Good." "Yeah, she looks divine." I meant to say yes. "I know you meant to say fun," laughed Kelly. "And as for my age, I'm in my 20s. "I didn't say anything about your age," Michael noted. But he thought shrewdly, though. He thought, why would I need to know her age? The new acquaintance lived in a dormitory. And that evening, she invited Michael to her room for a cup of tea. She winked slyly. The guy was finally convinced that Kelly was an uninhibited girl and decided that she was the one he needed. It was not their last meeting. The heir to the Matthews couple was crazy about the passionate beauty, and was not ready to part with her. At first, Michael thought it was more like a simple affair. Too frankly, Kelly coquettes at the disco. But what happened next was not at all like a serious relationship. But Kelly had an opinion about that. If two people realize that they want each other, what difference does it make when it happens in 2 o'clock or in 2 weeks? Some people procrastinate for months to prolong the intrigue, and then it turns out they're not right for each other. Frankly, Michael never gave it much thought. It was a given for him. Two people walking around holding hands, and only after a certain amount of time do they get to know each other more intimately. But I don't like the rituals, the candy bouquet, the period, and all that nonsense, she said. So the guy has had his day and won't give the girl a flower or a tiny chocolate bar again. But I gave you one. Aha, Kelly said in a satisfied voice. What did you have to prove? It doesn't make any difference now or in an hour. Michael liked that his new friend had her own opinions on everything, usually scathing, but generally correct, as it was called, not in the eye, but in the eye. He had never thought about many things before he met Kelly. She is unlike anyone else. Michael thought of her with delight. After a month, he realized he had fallen in love like a 6th grader. Reaching for his rapture, Michael was ready to lay the whole world at Kelly's feet. But since the whole world at Michael's disposal was not, the guy gave her flowers, took her to movies, cafes, saunas, and clubs. He spent almost all his time with Kelly. And one day Ethan said, at least introduce us to his girlfriend. It'd be interesting to see what kind of a marvelous, for which you forgot about everything in the world. Why would I forget? What do you mean? Why? My father snorted. You only come home at night. You come home at 0 o'clock. You're always flying around in the clouds. In the rare moments when your mother, and I do see you, you're always thinking about something, smiling and looking stupid and so stupid, so very stupid. Ethan winked. Kelly, how would you like to meet my parents? Are you sure? Rounded eyes. Well, since I'm suggesting it, I'm sure. Michael laughed. Sweetheart, it's okay. My parents asked me to introduce you to them. What if they didn't like me? Oh, honey, the main thing is that I like you cheerfully, he muttered. And then I'm sure they'll like you. But I'm not so much, the girl muttered. I don't recognize you. Where did your self-confidence go? I don't know, Kelly shrugged. I guess all girls get a bit of a chip on their shoulder. When it comes to meeting the parents, don't worry, I'm with you, he said. To Kelly, that phrase sounded not only trite, but also extremely unconvincing. After all, in their relationship, she played the first violin. The client seemed to have matured in an impassive voice, reported on one end of the wire. Good, the subscriber rejoiced, and having listened to the report, said that almost half of the case is done, but it is almost clear what I mean. How much clearer? And if he doesn't? Well, that's your problem. Kelly, who are your parents? Adriana asked. My parents? She asked. My parents live abroad in England, and you decided to stay here. The landlady was a little surprised. Yes, I mean, no. Anyway, they're there temporarily. Mom, but Kelly is studying here, Michael intervened. Yes, of course. Adriana nodded and stared at the guest. Kelly, why don't you try the chicken with salt and vegetables and white sauce? Ethan suggested in an unreal social tone. I'd love to. Kelly replied with a dazzling smile. Ethan studied the hotel news and currency exchange rates while his wife removed her makeup. She's kind of slippery. She broke the silence. Adriana, what are you talking about? Husband. It's not what, it's who. With a sigh, she clarified. And our son's friend. This Kelly. She didn't seem suspicious to you. Well, a little, Ethan admitted. Adriana exclaimed a little. Yeah, she's fake through and through. It's not clear where the truth is and where the lies are. And is there any truth in what she says? Well, you mother, you give, shook his head husband. Where do you get such conclusions? Oh, Ethan, are all men so blind? Perplexed, she asked, "You can't see further than your nose, but Michael's all right. He's head over heels in love, and it's going to take a lot of hard work to prove the obvious to him. But you've always been a cool thinker. I guess I really don't understand something," Ethan said thoughtfully. "I don't know. Take my question about my parents. Did you see the way her eyes went wide? That's just it. What's the big deal?" I asked. "Well, maybe she doesn't have a good relationship with her parents, so she doesn't want to talk about them." "Very possibly," Adriana agreed, settling into bed next to her husband. "But that's her yes. I mean no." And then this girl remembered that her parents were supposedly temporarily living abroad. "No, Ethan, I'm sensing something fishy here." "Yeah, you're probably right, husband. So maybe we should run her down. I'll call Christopher tomorrow. See if he can dig up anything interesting. Ethan, something tells me it's a last resort," Adriana said slowly and confessed. "I have a bad feeling about this." "Oh boy. Why would that be?" "I don't know, but it's definitely there." "You're just getting yourself worked up," said Ethan. He put his arm around his wife's shoulder and kissed her on the temple. "Good, if that's the case," she sighed. "So how's it going?" asked the big, brutal-looking man. "It would be all right, but his mother can confuse all the cards. Not a woman, but an X-ray," Kelly sighed, settling down on his mighty chest. "Dan, the big guy came out. I don't feel like going to extreme measures, It's a little early, and I don't want to show my face." "What do we do then?" "Do what?" With a chuckle, he asked again. "Are you asking me?" Smoothly led his Romero to talk about family life. And of course, pleasing him. "How can you do that?" The man chuckled. And Kelly erupted. "Christopher, what's my star? I said something wrong. I think it's all business. Aren't you jealous?" "Sad?" she asked. "It's business, baby," Christopher replied admonishingly. "And I suggest you treat it the same way. And all that, leave it to the losers. You better think of a way to get that chick to propose to you. He's actually talking about getting married. And he said he's gonna propose to me when he graduates," answered Kelly and winked. "Although I think Michael is ready to get married tomorrow." Christopher smiled and said with a deep smile, "Perhaps I should reconsider. I could get jealous." "I'll be glad. You and I will be glad," he promised. "But let's get back to the chick." Kelly giggled. "Yeah, so you're saying Michael's ready to get married tomorrow?" "I think he is. But he won't. "Okay, so we have to make him get married." "How?" "Oh, I have to teach you everything. Don't tell me you don't know it. The old-fashioned way women lure men into marriage. Michael, there's something I need to tell you." They were sitting in a cafe near the Institute, having coffee and cakes. "I'm listening to you carefully." Michael smiled. "Anyway, shit. I didn't realize it was so complicated," Kelly said in a confused voice, and lowered her eyes. "What's the big deal? It's just that I'm pregnant." She flipped through it and smiled awkwardly. "That's just the way it is. So what's the problem?" And Michael smiled cheerfully back. "Nothing terrible has happened. My favorite girl is expecting a child, and now we'll get married." "We're getting married?" Kelly asked incredulously. "But you said you had to study, get on your feet, and only then think about children." "Well, I did," the boy nodded. "But circumstances have changed. Anyway, Kelly, marry me." "I'm sorry I don't have a ring." "Sorry. That means yes," Kelly nodded. "So this calls for a celebration," exclaimed the newly wedded groom. But her beloved shook her head. "Michael, my darling, we will celebrate. But now I'm running away to the dorm tomorrow to learn a lot. You understand? The first course." "I understand," he nodded. "What's my cramming?" "Then I'll walk you out." But not with a smile, Kelly shook her head. "I still have to run to the library." "If you say so. I think I'll order another coffee. 0 o'clock studying. I'm sleepy. I can't sleep." "Oh, you poor thing." Sympathetically stretched out the girl and took a bite. Michael on the cheek left the cafe, and the happy groom headed for the distribution. If he had looked back, he might well have seen Kelly heading in the opposite direction from the dormitory. "Christopher, congratulate me," solemnly announced the new daughter-in-law of the country hotel owners. "Michael proposed to me, and I had no doubt about it," he replied, rubbing his hands together happily. "So this is something to celebrate. What do you think? Are they in cahoots or what?" Grinned to herself, and out loud she said, "That's a wonderful idea." "And what do I mean?" Christopher smiled, taking a bottle of expensive champagne, glasses, and a box of chocolates from the bar. He poured the champagne into glasses and said, but to family happiness, "Why are you a bride? It's a sad joke. You imagined it." "Yeah, maybe. Anyway, I heard somewhere that brides tend to get nervous before the wedding." "So it's a lie." "I guess so," Kelly said thoughtfully. "Yeah," Christopher nodded. "You'll invite me to the wedding." "And as what?" asked the bride. "That's a good question. But say, as a godfather." "Why?" "Because that's essentially what it was." And it was true. Nancy Kazantseva grew up in a dysfunctional family. From the very early childhood, she saw nothing but dirt, the stench of perpetually drunken parents, fights, foul language, and marginalized people who in their house were not outnumbered. Every day there was a new character. Drunken parties usually lasted until the last guest left, that is, until morning. And Nancy didn't get much sleep. It was very hard for her to concentrate on her lessons, and the girl had a hard time mastering the material. It turned out that Nancy skipped classes because there was no one to wake her up. The result was 2 years into 5th grade when Nancy turned 12. Her father left this world before passing away. Liam the Rusty, as he was known for his fiery red mustache, drank for 2 whole weeks. When the valiant police and paramedics found many empty liquor bottles in the house, the precinct officer shook his head. "It's strange that he didn't move 10 days ago. So much to drink. And judging by the smell, it's a hell of a mixture." The whole Mendeleev table. Liam Rusty's funeral was attended by all the local folk. Their private sector had its own elite. Good was a man, wiping away tears, said a spoiled woman of no certain age with impressive bags under the eyes and a dewy red nose. And a nail to hammer in will help, and on a bottle always borrowed. I mean borrowed. "Sleep well, Liam. May you rest in peace." And the woman said in a bad voice. From the outside one could think that she had lost a close person, and only the daughter of the deceased sitting quietly in the corner knew that it was so. After the funeral of the head of the family, Nancy's mother went on a bender. Vanessa had left the house more than once for days at a time, and she didn't care one bit. Her daughter. And what would she wear to school? The poor girl was laughed at all the time. Nancy was called the daughter of an alcoholic and other bad words that meant that her mother was not only abusing alcohol. Over time, Nancy learned to ignore it. After all, she had no reason to be ashamed of herself. Yes, her mother drank and was not known for being picky. But after all, it wasn't Nancy's fault in any way. Children are not responsible for their parents. By the time she was 16, Nancy was a real beauty. Guys started looking at her, and girls started joking about her. She'd become just like her mom. Nancy swallowed it, and that only hurt. She wasn't really interested in boys, like most girls forced to grow up early. They seemed small to Nancy, and when she had seen him for the first time as an adult, she had realized that she preferred older men. That older man turned out to be a friend of one of her mother's suitors. That evening, Jacob had had too much to drink and called his buddy to pick him up while waiting for a sober driver. Vanessa and her lover secluded themselves in the bedroom, and Nancy settled down on the terrace with a cup of tea. To the amazement of the girlfriend, Jacob arrived in an expensive car. Could drunks really have friends in such cars? She wondered, looking at the impressive Jeep, and when the man got out of the car, she was even more surprised. He was dressed in a light-colored or other suit and what appeared to be a brand-name t-shirt. When the man approached Nancy, the girl embarrassedly lowered her eyes and saw dazzling white sneakers clearly from the same price segment. And this is a friend of Jacob's. Did he have the wrong address? Sorry, I did not get the wrong address, as if guessed her thoughts. Asked the man of Krasnodar. 11. That's right. Yes, nodded Nancy. You must be here to pick up Jacob. Yes, nodded the visitor with dignity. The man smelled of expensive perfume, tobacco, and something else that confused the girl even more. I'll call him hurriedly, she said, and she dashed into the house. Nancy caught her breath and knocked on the bedroom door. Jacob is here for you, she said in a voice that didn't sound like her own. Together they walked Uncle Vasia to the car, and when the man who had come for Vanessa's drinking companion sat down behind the wheel, he suddenly looked at Nancy attentively. The look of Jacob's friend threw her first into heat and then into cold. But maybe she had taken wishful thinking for granted, and no look had actually happened. A few days later, the man visited the Kazantsevs again. When Nancy saw out the window the familiar Jeep, her heart pounded. So it seemed that it was about to pierce her chest. Yes, and go into free flight. And noticing the bouquet of tea roses in the man's hands, Nancy frowned. Had this respectable man set his eyes on her mother? And what was it? Perplexed, the girl thought. And when she realized she was jealous, she was horrified. He must be over 30, which by the standards of an 18-year-old girl means almost old age. Hello, he greeted Nancy. Hello, the girl replied discreetly, trying hard to appear calm. And my mom is not home. I'm not here to see your mom, smiled the man, holding out the flowers to Nancy. Do you like these? They are very beautiful, Nancy said, embarrassed. I've never been given flowers before. How old are you? The man chuckled. With such beauty. By the way, what is the name of one of the most beautiful girls of our city? Would you say she sparkled too? There are so many beauties in the city that the eyes are scattered, and me. And you just don't know your own value. In the city you say they're not beautiful, but spectacular. But you have real beauty from nature. So what's your name? Nancy blushed, the girl answered. But I'm Christopher. Let's get acquainted. And I've come to invite you to a restaurant. I'm going to a restaurant, Nancy exclaimed in amazement. You and you to the restaurant, Christopher confirmed with a smile. What's so surprising about me wanting to take a beautiful girl to a restaurant? Probably nothing, she replied, thinking. Only I don't have anything to go in. That's not a problem, the man assured her. Now we'll go through all the stores and buy you dresses. And there's shoes and jewelry and everything else. I don't even know, Nancy said at a loss. But why on earth would this flamboyant gentleman invite a girl from a family of alcoholics to a restaurant? Nancy was. Surely it is worth to this Bogachev only to whistle. All the most beautiful, spectacular women of the city will run away. Or doesn't she realize something? Afraid, Christopher stated. I do. I mean, we're practically strangers. But I assure you, I'm not doing you any harm. It's just that I liked you, and I wanted to get to know you better. I apologize if I've been intrusive. Well, I agree, Nancy interrupted. That trip was the beginning of an affair. A week later, Nancy moved into Christopher's luxurious 4-bedroom apartment. Vanessa breathed a sigh of relief. No one would be cramping her freedom now. Not spoiled by life. The girl was over the moon. The new life was a paradise. Christopher swamped Nancy with gifts, took her to restaurants for parties, took her to Spain for a week. Besides, he didn't go out, he didn't drink with his buddies, and for a month he never once raised his voice to Nancy. Why didn't you go to school anywhere? Asked Christopher once. I applied to technical school, but I didn't pass shyly, answered the girl. I see, nodded he. And for whom, if it's not a secret? On the secretary. Oh yeah. And why exactly on the secretary? It's not too high, he shrugged. It's not too high. Yeah, but what about the higher ones? No chance at all. No, Nancy replied nonchalantly. I didn't do well in school. I even had to repeat a year once. But that's okay, Christopher chuckled. There would be a desire to learn with this how. The desire is there. That's good. I'll take care of your education. You'll still graduate from my institute, he assured. I'll go to college. No, I can't. I say you can. There's nothing unrealistic. You'll see. You and me will make it. You and me. Those words sounded like music to Nancy. Well, he was the kind of man you could only dream of. Only he wouldn't marry her. But she thought it was only a matter of time. Alas, she was wrong. Before Nancy knew it, she and Christopher had been living together for 2 months. One morning, when Nancy was preparing breakfast for her beloved, she received a phone call from her neighbor, Aunt Olga, who was almost the only non-drinking woman in the neighborhood. Trouble. Nancy reread. Vanessa was gone. What happened? I got cold. Nancy turns out the mother fell asleep drunk with a cigarette, causing their dilapidated house to burst into flames like a cardboard box. Talking to a neighbor, Nancy found her hands shaking. The girl couldn't say she loved her mother much. And for what? For not having a normal childhood. For the ridicule that Nancy had to endure at her mercy. In that moment, however, she forgave her mother everything. Vanessa was gone, and now she would answer for all her sins before God. All expenses associated with the grief clap were borne by Christopher. The fairy tale ended as swiftly as it had begun. Time to pay off the debts, he said one day. What debts? Nancy's brow furrowed in bewilderment. What debts? Beauty parlors, shopping, doping, and all the other ladies' tricks, and finally, seeing your car off for the last time. All of which, as you realize, costs money. But sunshine, I am not Mother Teresa or Santa Claus, nonchalantly said Christopher. But you know I don't have any money of my own. Humiliated flew the girl. No, you will. But you have a cute face and a cool figure. And you're a real piece of work when it comes to love. I'll tell you that much. And if you use it wisely, you'll have a beautiful life. Do you want to give me to a brothel? She asked in horror. Christopher laughed out loud. My doll, where did you get such thoughts? Narrow-minded princess. You're a one-of-a-kind item. Not for drunken sauna-goers. There's a whole world out there waiting for you. A new life and a new name. Nancy stared at her roommate in incomprehension. Let's go to my office, he said. This is the ticket to your new life, Christopher said, handing her a dark burgundy book, which on closer inspection turned out to be a passport in the name of Marlowe and Kelly. But that's me, Nancy said confusedly, seeing the girl's face in the photo. Of course it is. You confirmed henceforth you are Marlowe Kelly. I told you that you are starting a new life under a new name. And I'm giving you a job. What kind of job? Now we're talking business. What should I call your job title? I'll formulate the hell out of it. I can't think of anything. But an errand clerk sounds good to me. Or maybe. Nancy didn't argue. So Kelly's starting to realize what she's gotten herself into. She was too confused by the word specific. And in general. What was I saying? Christopher rejoiced, ignoring the expression on Nancy Kelly's face. Read the job description. No, I can't. The girl shook her head. Having listened to the job description, according to this, so to speak, document, Kelly was to be a con artist, for which all means are good, and when it came to a young and beautiful girl, she didn't even want to think about it. You can, Christopher said in an icy voice. You were able to accept gifts from me and go to restaurants, weren't you? And so we don't waste any time. Let's start working today. As already today, Kelly asked in a lowered voice. She was afraid to even guess what she would have to do. What was there to look forward to? Fun, asked the employer. You start sooner, you learn sooner, and you learn sooner, you learn faster. Consider me, and you will become an independent and self-sufficient lady with education. Don't worry, I haven't forgotten. The kid said the kid did the kid did the kid. Besides, I'll give you some of the money in hand. But you have to dress up, take care of yourself. It's a profession. Christopher playfully pecked the girl's cheek, and at that moment Kelly realized she had no choice. Serves you right. The fool did her worst torture. Thought you got it all for the pretty eyes. So let's work it off. Everything has to be paid for, especially pleasure. And now the first task. Christopher spoke in the tone of a strict but kind and fair teacher. Kelly sighed and prepared to listen. There is in our glorious city one major, someone else slacker and idler. Sebastian began. He outlined the task. John Korov owns several parking lots in the city. The father of this very son was one of Christopher's main competitors. As for his son, Sebastian, a young hustler, the guy was a lover of love for sale. That's where the game was to be played. The fact that John ran for mayor of the city and his biography should be perfect. A son who likes to spend time with a love maid. What nonsense. The plan was for Christopher Sebastian to order a call girl who turns out to be Kelly. Christopher's people take photos of their playdates, and then it's a matter of technique. In this case, blackmail. And if John does not get off the track, the racy photos will fall into the hands of those who should not see them. The result is a scandal with all the consequences. The customer is a serious man, so it is very important not to justify. Finished with the instruction. No, I cannot. Snickly Kelly no, so after all, my darling on no and no judgment. Divorced Christopher. If you have the opportunity to pay me with a bill or a bank transfer, I'm all for it. Do you have any? No, she sighed. Then what are we talking about? Christopher had connections almost everywhere, including among pimps. Korov Jr. was a regular customer of all the offices, which meant that Christopher had every chance to realize his plan. And so it happened. 3 days after this conversation, Christopher received a phone call from a familiar mom, and the deal took place. And then there was a scam with the wife of Kelly's alleged lover. The girl showed up at the spouse's house and said she was dating her lover. And if you do not want those who are not supposed to know about Ivan's adventures, pay $100, said Kelly. The woman, unaware that her husband and the blackmailer did not even know each other, instantly paid the demanded amount. Since the time, Kel felt more confident. She was used to a new name, a new life, a new self. Now it seemed to Kelly that there was no Nancy Kazantsev. Living in the private sector of her parents' death was only Christopher in their business. In odd, Kelly caught herself thinking that she believed in the legends that he presented to his victims. Did Kellen feel sorry for these people? She had no clear answer to that question. On the one hand, yes, when Kel was talking nonsense with an honest expression on her face, she felt uncomfortable. Keep it simple, Christopher advised. It's better to think about the fact that some people have everything and others have nothing. Some have life on a plate, and some have to work their asses off and deal with problems all the time. You think I'd always lived like this? No, you haven't. I'm an orphan. You never talked about it. There was no reason to. And I didn't. I shrugged. And now he was shocked. It always seemed to the girl that the employer's roommate was a guy from a well-to-do family. Surprisingly, but after Christopher revealed to Kelly this part of his biography, he became closer to her. As a matter of fact, the close relationship was still going strong. But Christopher and Kelly became to each other more like good buddies, or in the depths of her soul, somewhere at the very bottom, close anger and love. And so 2 years passed. Remember, I was talking about your education. Frankly, she'd forgotten all about it. Moreover, Kelly now had little idea of herself as a student. I remember, she nodded. What's this? I think it's a good time to think about education. Besides, you're going to have to make the best of a bad situation. What's that? Kelly asked. It's like this. There's a guy named Michael Matthews at Polytechnic. The guy is mastering the hotel business, and it's no coincidence that his parents own a country hotel. And you, my princess, are to marry him, she marveled. Yes, I thought I made myself clear. You must marry him. But why? And this is already a business conversation, Christopher rejoiced. And the purpose of your marriage is simple: to get the apartment. But agree, you cannot live in my apartment all the time. So I'm letting you go. You set up your life and everything. Actually, Kelly was happy to live with Christopher, and she saw her life with him, no matter what the situation. She loved him more than life, and she couldn't help it. But she had to marry him. Kelly muttered. We do, Christopher nodded. Personally, I can see only one way to hit the apartment. Live there for 6 months. Then you file for divorce and voila. The apartment's all yours. But after the divorce, the apartment is usually forfeited. Kelly pointed out. You're smart, he said approvingly. You're changing the apartment. Unprofitable for your Supreminco. We under whom it is necessary. Well, what if there will be other applicants for the apartment? What applicants? No, but if you decide to have a baby, then sure. What a joke you're making. One thing I'm not going to do anytime soon. It's having a baby. I'm talking about his parents. What's his parents got to do with it? Christopher snorted. You don't think his parents are going to buy the newlyweds an apartment with their $1 million? Kelly, good point. Everything's gonna be just right. You'll be married to the sole heir to a wealthy man. You'll be rolling in the dough. Aha. Unless I'm married to the wrong person, Kelly thought bitterly. Oh my God. It's about time. The man I love is marrying me off. I don't care if his parents were 3 times as wealthy. Christopher, wake up. I don't want anyone but you. Don't you realize that? Okay. Well, what are we unhappy about? Christopher asked with a sigh. It's business, baby. It's nothing personal, yeah, she said quietly and repeated thoughtfully. It's nothing personal. Exactly. Oh yes, tomorrow we're going to apply to the Polytechnic Institute for the hotel business department. We'll make a cultured and educated lady out of you, winked the employer. Kelly couldn't sleep that night. She expected anything but this. No, Kelly, of course, had long ago realized that Christopher had no tender feelings for her. But this, yes, was a real spit in the face. Take it easy. She remembered Christopher's words. Kelly had a way of doing that, but not this time. Why are you so stupid? Angrily, she said, not even realizing she was speaking out loud. He doesn't need you. It's finally stupid. Kelly looked at Christopher. He was sleeping sweetly and probably had his 10th dream. And the girl decided that her marriage was not the worst idea. What if Christopher realizes he's lost Kelly and wants her back? It's a long shot, but that's what life is all about. Christopher took Kelly to a restaurant after she applied to the institute. But here's to a fresh start. Christopher smiled, raising his wine glass. Aha, she said languidly. You're taking it to the next level. Edifyingly, he said. Aha. Yeah, something took over. Aha. Aha. Christopher exclaimed. What's wrong with that? Did you know what you were getting into? I did. Kelly, but you're what you call a professional. So be one. Yeah, sure, I nodded. She's picking at her meat salad. There was no appetite at all. No matter how much Kelly tried to convince herself that this marriage would only benefit her, her soul desperately protested. This is it, Kelly thought, when she saw her name on the enrollment list. The machine had already been started, so it was too late. Michael Matthews was easy to charm. He's obviously inexperienced, Kelly thought. If he'd ever had a girlfriend, he didn't have much to brag about. Kelly suddenly felt like a femme fatale, and everything went according to plan. But the marriage proposal was still a long shot. And no wonder, because Michael was still a student, and therefore could not offer anything to his potential wife. Cool, you said he is so good with you calmly, honestly. I would marry you even today. But first the institute, and then everything else. Well, that was to be expected. But Christopher demanded immediate results. So they had to use the heavy artillery, a non-existent pregnancy. Kelly was disgusted, but what could she do? The amount of debt was too high. Of course, the thought of not filing for divorce crossed her mind. And move on with Michael. But Christopher wasn't to be trifled with. 6 months at the most, he said. Like he was cutting it off. letting Kelly know that trick wasn't gonna work, and she'd grown attached to Michael. Kelly felt a little sorry for him at times, the only heir to the Matthews fortune. He was just a kid. The chick had spoken contemptuously of him to Christopher, and in general was not far from the truth. But Kelly was uncomfortable with the feeling she had for Michael. It was like a mother's. And what mother would like it when someone spoke ill of her child? Besides, the girls at the Institute were jealous of Kelly. Had they known, as for her feelings for Christopher, they, to her deepest regret, remained the same. However, the thought that the lover may realize who he lost firmly lodged in her head. The main thing is that the news that Kelly is pregnant should lead to a logical conclusion. Although, of course, closure was out of the question. After all, this was just the beginning. When Kelly had informed Michael that she was pregnant, she had felt like the ultimate asshole. Even though he'd said he was prioritizing his studies right now, he wasn't going to shirk his responsibilities. But how would Michael's parents feel about it? He assured them everything would be fine. But Kelly, unlike her fiancé, had no illusions and was absolutely right. You proposed to her. Adriana was furious. You're out of your mind. Since when is willingness to take responsibility a sign of insanity? The son asked with a wry chuckle. Kelly is pregnant, and as an honest man, I'm obliged to marry her. What's wrong? Everything is wrong. The mother cut him off. Kelly is a girl out of our league. But you know, mother, we're not of the Earl's class either. Besides, what's wrong with Kelly? She's pretty. She's studying. She's thinking about her future. Yeah, I can see how she thinks. Adriana. And you've been dreaming a lot about marrying a fool like you. But you don't know her at all, Michael. You've only seen her once, and such conclusions. Admit it, you were just jealous. Perhaps, Adriana admitted. She couldn't help admitting that she was. But that's not the point. She's kind of shady. And she's acting suspicious. Personally, I haven't noticed anything. But then again, my mother would have been sarcastic. You're in love. That's the point. Oh, Michael, I don't want to talk about it anymore. In time, you'll see that I'm right. Mother, no matter what you say now, I'm still going to marry Kelly. With an uncharacteristic firmness, Michael said. After all, I'm of age. You're the one who taught me to stand my ground. So you taught me to stand my ground. When did he grow up? Thought Adriana, who had only ever seen a guy who wasn't decisive. This guy didn't know what he wanted out of life. Now he seems to know. He's also learned to stand his ground. Do whatever you want. Adriana waved his hand. Don't say you weren't warned. Okay, I won't, Michael promised. And I also wanted to be civil, so there's no talk of the Matthews hiding their only son's wedding. We'll have an engagement party to which our business partners will be invited. In Michael's opinion, it was prejudice. Who cares about his wedding? But I didn't argue. People, as you realize, are respectable, continued his mother. So I want your Kelly to hope for a little more decorum. No cleavage and slits to the navel. I do not want to blush for the future daughter-in-law. That's a little over the top. The mother clearly wanted to humiliate Kelly. Kelly had nothing but good taste, but Michael chose not to be provoked. For better or worse. But he and his mother had a deal. So was it worth teasing the geese? All right, Michael nodded. But as long as it's good, you can apply tomorrow. And on Saturday, the engagement party announced her plans to Adriana, and remembering, she added, oh, yes, the bride's parents' attendance is mandatory. Kelly took one last look in the mirror and was pleased with her reflection. She had never looked so beautiful. 300 hours at the salon had not gone to waste. The masseur, hairdresser, and makeup artist had done their best. The outfit was also above all praise and fully met the requirements of the future mother-in-law. Strictly evening dress protected the luxurious figure of Kelly, but at the same time did not reveal anything superfluous. Her breasts were covered, but everyone could notice how beautiful her collarbones were. Chic golden tan, obtained in the best tanning salon in the city, perfectly harmonized makeup in uncomfortable colors. Upon seeing the bride, Michael opened his mouth. These daughters of parents' business partners to heaven. With pride, he thought, she has, unlike these silicone, thick, different hair and eyelashes, natural beauty. Michael had not thought to pass on to Kelly his mother's words about how she should dress. Firstly, he was afraid of offending, and secondly, he knew that the bride would not hit the dirt. Vile and tasteless. Not Kelly. Kelly, you're charming, Ethan said gallantly. He kissed the girl's hand. Thank you for the compliment. She was checking, noticing out of the corner of her eye Adriana's unkind look. Kelly grinned to herself. The future mother-in-law clearly expected her to be vulgar, but not on that attack. The male half of the invitees kept their eyes on Kelly. The ladies present wrinkled their brows, but she was having fun. You think you've got the world in your pocket? I thought, Kelly, about businessmen's wives and business ladies. No way, no amount of plastic surgery can make you look any older than you are. At that moment, Kelly felt like a queen. Thoughts about Christority retreated not even to the second, and unknown to what plan. And the girl thought for the last few days for the umpteenth time that everything was not so bad. How many girls dream of being in her shoes? That's just it. Kelly, your parents didn't even fly in for your daughter's engagement party. In a fake sympathetic tone, Adriana asked. No, they didn't, she replied. They have a lot of work to do. That's how the lady of the house supposedly nodded understandingly. But I hope they'll be at the wedding. Yes, of course. Kelly nodded politely, wondering where she would get her parents. That's fine. Ethan intervened. Let's have a toast to our future family. That's a great idea, the wife exclaimed. How was the engagement? Christopher asked. It was fine, shrugged Kelly. True, the future mother-in-law so from Pavliev me a look. But otherwise everything is very good. Men drooled, their wives were angry. In short, everything in the best traditions of secular society. There's more to come, smiled the benefactor. There will be more, sighed Anna Christopher. There's a little problem. I'm all ears. Michael's mother keeps talking about my parents. The first time we met, she asked who they were and what they did. Well, did you tell her they live abroad? They have a business there. Is that right? Approvingly, Christopher nodded. Then what's the problem? Yes, Adriana asked me about my parents too, which made me wonder if she suspected something. And then today, she asked about them again. Like I hope my parents will be at the wedding, Christopher said thoughtfully. I don't know what the hell that's about, but I don't like it at all. Yeah, well, whatever. We'll solve problems as they come. In the meantime, okay, you'll have parents. Kelly's parents turned out to be solid-looking people. The role of the bride's father was played by a man about 45 years old. According to Christopher, they pulled more than one case for the role of the mother of the newlyweds and invited a beautiful, slender brunette about the same age. Kelly, don't you think you look like a mother? Christopher winked as he introduced them. She looked at the woman closely and found that Christopher was right. The resemblance was indeed there. The woman had been a theater actress in the past, and her name was Christina. Rumbled the swarm so no one would know for sure, and everything would go off in the best possible way. The marriage of Michael and Kelly took place on New Year's Eve. Past the session, go on a wedding trip, Ethan said. Thailand. The wedding did go off without a hitch. It couldn't have been otherwise. Christopher Kelly and her parents had planned every detail and thought of everything. What business are they engaged in? Where did they meet? What Kelly was like as a child, and so on. Christopher also attended the wedding and introduced himself as the bride's godfather. The parents of the groom sort of calmed down, but Kelly was wondering what would happen next. In Thailand, the newlyweds went on excursions, but most often just walked around and went to local restaurants. Kelly was surprised to realize that she liked spending time with Michael on vacation. He's different, she thought. Michael had had to vacation in Thailand before, so he was only too happy to work as a personal guide for his beautiful wife. The only thing that embarrassed Kelly was having to pretend to be pregnant. She burst through more than once to tell her husband that no child they will not have. But Michael had been so touching in his concern for her. Plus, there's no telling how he'd react to being lied to. And more importantly, for what purpose? 2 weeks of vacation flew by like a day. Kelly hated to go back. She also felt sorry for Michael. She felt sorry for herself too. "How are you looking?" Christopher winked playfully at Pauline. "The honeymoon's been good for you. Watch out, I'll get jealous." And Kelly suddenly realized with amazement that she did not care. It wasn't that long ago that she'd been wishing she did. Christopher had really lost me, Kelly thought, in every way. If it weren't for this stupid assignment, why aren't you being affectionate? Christopher squinted. "Come on, admit it. Did you swim?" "That's out of the question. Remember who you are and who they are." "I remember everything perfectly." "Cold," she said. "Well, don't forget. I wish I knew what to do about pregnancy," Kelly sighed. "A pillow." "Why a pillow?" "Good of you to bring it up. By the way," nodded Christopher. "So you're thinking about the case. Well, that's commendable. What about the pregnancy?" "I faked a miscarriage. Like I know what that's like." "What's the internet for?" The miscarriage was almost a joke, but Christopher fixed it. The problem was solved with 2 $10 bills. "You're a human orchestra," Kelly said to her patron, but he only waved it off. He was more concerned about something else. When would Matthews buy the newlyweds an apartment? It was out of the question. Kelly disappointed him. They'd said something about buying us an apartment when Michael graduated, and Christopher grumbled no better. So there's no way to influence them. I wonder how. The circus on Lanyo. "Ethan, it's okay. My mother-in-law can't stand me. Can you do anything about it?" "My darling Christopher. And why would you want to influence them directly? I understand that your husband is crazy about you. Or am I wrong?" "No," Kelly blushed. "Then what's the point?" "The point is that it seems to be mutual." "No, it's not about anything." With a sigh, the young woman shook her head. "Well, I'll try to influence Michael." "I won't," Christopher said stiffly. "I will." "All right, I will," Kelly said obediently. It's been 3 months. Unfortunately, it's easier said than done. One day, Kelly told her husband that it would be a good idea to get an apartment and live separately. Get an apartment? Michael was surprised. What's the need? But we could be alone together more. The young wife smiled slyly. Yes, we seem to have it pretty good now, he remarked. That's true. There were 5 rooms in the Matthews apartment. Ethan and Adriana worked late. Plus, they traveled a lot. Anyway, it wasn't much of an argument. Well, I don't like coming out of the bathroom in a towel and running into your father in the hallway, said Kelly another time. And Adriana doesn't like it. I wish we had a separate apartment. Kelly actually ran into Ethan in the hallway. Only once was she actually wearing the same towel. She wasn't naked. Michael had his hands full. That's right. And the father-in-law only delicately averted his eyes. Adriana seemed to trust her husband. Otherwise, she would have long ago judged her son and daughter-in-law far away. In short, Kelly was forced to admit that this argument was not good for anything either. Harewell, be patient for a couple of years, and we will have a separate apartment, Michael exhorted her. Parents promised. And to rent it. Agree, not an option. You and I are still studying. I don't have money for a rented place. I don't want to ask my parents. You're right, Kelly thought sadly. But you have no idea who you're dealing with. She wanted to howl with longing and hopelessness. I don't know. How can I influence Michael? In despair, she said to Christopher. Well, I don't know. That's all. I tell Michael that I want to live with him separately. And he says, we don't have the money to rent a place. So let him know you're not interested in rented accommodation. The patron spread his hands. But it's not even better, Kelly exclaimed. And how do you envision it? Honey, let your parents buy us an apartment. But you have to admit, that's crazy. What if he said, let your parents do it, too? Why? I mean, they're wealthy. Yes, Christopher said thoughtfully. I guess you're right. Okay, I have an idea. It was said with military menace, and Kelly became alert. What kind of idea? Ma'am. You'll know a lot. You'll be old soon enough. The newlyweds' life went on as usual. Ethan and Adriana had grown accustomed to their daughter-in-law, and slowly but surely, things were getting better between them. Kelly's parents supposedly traveled back overseas, but visited the Matthews before they left. The first time, Adriana graciously invited them to dinner. Mrs. Matthews, who has long dreamed of going international, transparently hinted at doing business together. We will think about it with dignity, Noah promised. The second visit was made on the occasion of the arrival of the young people from their wedding trip. My new life consists of a lot of lies, Kelly concluded. A sad conclusion. She couldn't wait to get out of it, but something told her it wouldn't end well. Her intuition was not fooling Kelly. So this is it, my children. Adriana announced at breakfast. Tomorrow we're going on vacation for a month. So for a month you're going to be masters of this place. And where did you get shot at? As we were leaving, Michael was curious. Montenegro. Cool. Yeah, my mother smiled. And to say 2 years of hard work. The next day, as Michael sat in the library, his phone rang. It was his father. Yes, Dad, hello. How may I address you? It was asked in a man's voice. I'm Michael Matthews, he replied, coldly. It was clear that something terrible had happened to his parents. You are the son of Matthews, Ethan, and Adriana. The voice clarified. Yes, that's right. Michael is with you. This is Police Major Mason. I'm very sorry, but your parents were killed in a traffic accident. I'm so sorry for your loss. Michael was terrified and couldn't say a word. And Major Mason asked Michael if you could come up for a lineup. Yes, of course, he said sadly. Come where? Write down the address. Kelly cried when she heard about the death of her husband's parents. She couldn't believe it. And not just that. The young woman was afraid to think about it. But it was obvious. Okay, I have an idea. Christopher's voice haunted Kelly everywhere at home, at the Institute, at the morgue where she'd volunteered to go with the grief-stricken Michael, and at the cemetery. Yeah, he's a scary man, she thought. And that's the man I loved. How could I be any better? If Michael hadn't met me, would his parents still be alive? Not if I hadn't met that monster. Yeah, I should have run like hell to get away from him. After the wake, Michael told Irina about his childhood, about how he didn't go to school and protest, and her heart burst with pity. She had never imagined it would end so horribly. At times, Kelly hoped she was wrong. After all, there are coincidences. And 3 days later, Christopher called. Come over, he said. I have to talk to him. Okay, I'll be there in an hour, Kelly sighed. I thought with a sinking feeling that now I'd know for sure. Michael, I'm gonna go get the groceries, she told her husband. The refrigerator is empty. Michael nodded and continued to pretend to watch TV. And Kelly put on jeans, gave out a light glass jacket, and taking her purse from the shelf, left the apartment. Honestly, you have a grin written all over your face, Christopher muttered. Yes, I didn't do it myself, of course. You were interested, weren't you? What kind of scumbag are you? Kelly shook her head. But take it easy, he grimaced. You've forgotten what hole I pulled you out of. And for words like that, you might not get out of here. Unless they carry you out of here, under the cover of night. I don't care anymore. I got nothing to lose. You're probably right, Christopher nodded. But don't get your hopes up. It's so easy to get away with it. You're brave. Think about it. What good would your untimely death do me? Except to get my hands dirty. No, it's time to go to Plan B. All right. I'll help you complete your mission, and you can be free to go. What's the plan? I can't hear the enthusiasm in your voice. He scolded Kelly and laid out the plan. And not to waste time. Tomorrow we will start my plan cheerfully, said Christopher. I dare not delay you any longer. Kelly sullenly took home and wondered if she should tell Michael. And then what would happen? Michael, of course, will hate me, probably want to divorce me. By the way, Christopher needs a divorce. Yeah, but I don't want to take away Michael's apartment and his business. And then it's his parents' apartment, not marital property. What the hell is a divorce? The young woman's thoughts bounced back and forth, but nothing came to mind. Kelly knew that Christopher had the means to juggle everything. So the apartment would end up being posted. And if she gave her notice already, she'd be in trouble. They'll just take her away to some woods and call it a day. Let it go, Kelly summed up. It was not in her position to make any sudden moves. Kelly went to the store and after buying bread, milk, potatoes, and chicken fillets, went up to the apartment. It was quiet there. Michael had fallen asleep in front of the television with the remote control in his hand. Poor little guy. With sympathy, she thought. Doesn't even know what's in store for him. For a second, she thought about telling Michael. Who knows, maybe the two of them could work something out. But the fear was stronger. Maybe it's not the right time. But what's wrong? Did you flinch? Asked the husband. No, nothing's wrong, Kelly reassured him. It's just that my godfather is coming to visit us. He was at our wedding, remember? Yeah, I remember, Michael sighed. But to be honest, I didn't really feel like having guests. I see, she sighed back. Well, I'll tell him what. It's fine, let him come over. He waved his husband's hand sluggishly. Really? No, if you do not mind. I understand everything. What's the big deal? Christopher showed up a couple days later with a large antelope suitcase. How long are you staying? Michael asked. We'll see. Vaguely answered the guest, and Kelly thought better of herself. Think, you fool. She cut herself off. How do you feel about casinos? Asked Christopher. Never once visited this institution, he admitted. So this gap must be filled. Cheerfully said the godfather of the wife. But to be honest, I have a prejudice against casinos. Come on, what's the reason? Just heard about people getting hooked on gambling. I'm too suggestible. There was a time when I had to learn to overcome the inability to say no and stand my ground. And as Christopher hummed, it worked. Michael smiled. Otherwise, Kelly and I wouldn't be married right now. What are you talking about? Imagine, to be honest, my parents were against our marriage at first, but I insisted. Well, then you're just gonna have to go to the casino, exclaimed the guest. As long as you're okay with it, there's no risk of you getting locked up. And then you just have to know where to go. So how about a casino? Why not? That night, Michael won a large sum of money and was euphoric. He treated everyone there to expensive champagne, then continued to play and won again. After that, Trinity went to one of the best restaurants in the city. And the next evening, Michael offered to go to the casino again. This time, the wins were followed by losses. But in the end, Matthews left the gambling establishment not empty-handed. Well, guys, let's go play tonight. He asked over dinner. Maybe we shouldn't, Kelly said shyly. Of course we should, said Christopher. The excitement's still there. You gotta play. What a load of crap. After losing almost all his savings, Michael became desperate, and then he tried to pay off his debt and failed miserably. So the heir to the late owners of the country hotel became a regular at the casino. He was in and out of luck, and it got to the point that one day the casino owner wouldn't let him play. When you pay back what you owe, then we'll talk, he said. Mind they're a charitable organization. Kelly doomed herself by watching her lover. Yes, that's how a husband turns into an affair. But there was nothing she could do to help him. She could help herself. And when Christopher winked at Kelly and said, well, is it time? All she had to do was resign herself to fate. Michael has a theme, Christopher said. What's the subject? It's about your duty. Yes. Indifferently, he asked. Michael's brain was so foggy that he did not understand. Here he was the culprit of his current problems, and therefore he trusted Christopher unconditionally. Anyway, Michael, I want to buy your debt. I don't even have any money, and they won't let me play, sighed Matthews. Yeah, but you have a business and an apartment left over from your parents. I don't inherit until 6 months from now. Oh, come on, Christopher laughed. I'm on. What can I arrange everything? So you don't have to wait 6 months. Really? Really, he replied. You described the business and the apartment to me, and you don't owe anyone or anything. But where am I going to live? Don't worry about that. We'll summarize your housing. Kelly, who was putting on a mask at the time, had a darkening in her eyes. Did it dawn on the young woman what kind of trap she had fallen into? What if it had been an apartment jointly acquired during the marriage? Kelly thought, but suddenly realized there would probably be no exchange. Christopher would have taken possession of the apartment anyway and set her and Michael adrift. And since that was the case, Michael shook her head. What am I hearing? Christopher said mockingly. His voice broke through. Why didn't you say something before? Silent about what? With suspicion, asked Michael. Michael, I can explain, Kelly exclaimed. I couldn't let you explain to me what's going on. The husband couldn't take it anymore. However, he was beginning to realize that everything from their marriage to Kelly to the appearance of Christopher was for a reason. Yeah, he got me hooked on the game on purpose. Michael gasped to himself. I still haven't learned how to say no, you idiot. Allow me a courteous tone, Christopher asked and began to tell. After hearing him, Matthews clutched his head. Michael, that's not quite true. Kelly flipped through it. He didn't tell you everything. I also love you. What a touching laugh from Christopher. I wondered what was missing from that story. But now that we're in the middle of it, I can in good conscience tell you to get out. And you, Mr. Matthews, I'll see a notary tomorrow. I'll draw you an address. And yes, I don't advise you to go to the police. You probably know that. But where should we go? Kelly asked. That's your problem, Christopher said. Michael, where are you going now? In a pitiful voice, Kelly asked. Anywhere. He cut him off. What about me? What does this have to do with us getting divorced? How did you want it? And Michael, but I love you. And I still don't understand you, of course. Where am I? Mommy and Daddy to my son, Michael said bitterly. And then it hit him. Those two were responsible for the death of his parents. All right, Kelly, let's split up. I'll call you later and we'll talk about the divorce. What do you say? The wife said quietly and walked away. Michael walked on and thought about where to stay. He sat down on a bench and took his cell phone out of his pocket and started calling his friends. Michael, I'd love to, but I'm flying to Sochi today. No, man, I'm sorry, but my parents are against it. Oh no, I'm with a girl. So you understand. He understood. He realized he had no friends as such. All the Matthews' few relatives lived in other cities. Michael didn't want to bother them. What a shame. Not only was his wife not who she said she was, but her godfather, who turned out to be a former roommate, had put him in debt. Michael wandered through the city and did not notice how he found himself on the outskirts of one of the most shabby neighborhoods. Meanwhile, Kelly was mourning her failed life. Christopher really didn't tell Michael everything, like the fact that Kelly, like himself, was also working off a debt. And then Christopher never coordinated his actions with her. Take the car accident that Ethan and Adriana got into. And Michael would probably blame me for their deaths. Desperate, the young woman thought. And he's right. If I hadn't come into his life, what good would it do to think about it? Kelly stood on the bridge and looked thoughtfully at the river. The current was very fast, and in some places there were whirlpools. It was dangerous to swim here. But it was easy to get out of life. The young woman resolutely put her foot over the railing. And what are you thinking? She heard a man's voice, and a second later, she felt someone grab her arm. Let me go, Kelly shouted. Who are you to take over my life? But the man in his 50s paid no attention to her cries. He put Kelly in an old jegulanok, and only then spoke. Who am I? I'm a man who served in a hot spot, And I've seen people who desperately cling to even the tiniest chance of survival. Do you really think I'd let someone drive off a bridge like that? Kelly didn't answer. Her tears prevented her from speaking. But crying will make it easier, the man said, holding out a wet washcloth to Kelly. It won't. When the young woman gradually calmed down, the unexpected savior handed her a small bottle of mineral water and said, "Well, tell me what happened to you. You know, I think you're going to be fine," said the man whose name was James. "How old are you?" "Well, the fact that you have nowhere to go is fixable." "Fixable?" Kelly sighed. "In what way?" "Let's go," the man said, starting the car and seeing the doubt in Kelly's eyes. He added, "Don't worry. I don't hire people for specific assignments. Although from what point of view? Let's go and see for yourself." They drove up to a small hospital drowning in greenery, which was beginning to blossom. In the courtyard of the hospital stood a small and very beautiful church. "So Kelly thinks you have a place to live and a job now." James smiled. "You see, that outhouse over there is a lighthouse where you will live. What kind of job do you want to offer me?" "As the chief physician of this medical institution, I want to offer you the position of an orderly. It's important," he said. "Thank you very much," Kelly smiled. "I don't know how to thank you, but I'll thank you kindly, James, when I get the chance. In the meantime, go make arrangements. If you want to take a shower, go to the hospital building and see the hostess nurse. I'll let her know." So Kelly found herself some shelter and a job. She dutifully performed the duties of a nurse. She socialized with the staff and slowly forgot her old life. Now, for the first time in her life, Kelly could say that she was truly happy. And even if Kelly did not live in a 5-room apartment and did not visit beauty salons, but her conscience was clear. If there was anything that marred the young woman's life, it was the longing for Michael. It had been over a month since the Matthews soul hair had led a vagabond life, the day Christopher had driven Michael out of his own apartment. He had stumbled into the rather spacious basement of an abandoned house. To his amazement, there was a desk, but also an old armchair. Michael had some money left, so the problem with food was also solved. But he realized that one day his savings would run out and he would have to look for a job. At first, the new vagabond thought of settling in some hostel. But having imagined how he would present his passport in the name of Matthews Michael Ethanovich, he gave up this idea. Shame and shame. After all, the surname is known in the city. Besides, he was afraid that Christopher's men were looking for him. Sleeping in a chair all night, Michael got up somehow. His legs stiffened, and his 5th point was square. We should go to the dump. Maybe I can find some old blankets there, he thought. He didn't have to go far for blankets. As Michael walked out of the yard, he saw a dumpster with something gluey peeking out of it. It was definitely blankets, and he quickened his pace. To Michael's great joy, the blanket was not the only one. A comfortable recliner was assured. He thought happily and carried the blanket to his new dwelling. The main advantage of living on the outskirts of the city was that no one knew Michael. He worked part-time as a loader in 2 stores nearby. Sometimes he went to the dump, where he sometimes found quite decent household items. Occasionally, he found some nice dishes. But Michael was reluctant to pick them up. Who knows what the previous owner of the cups and spoons had been ill with? From time to time, Michael felt like a character in an adventure movie or a reality show and caught himself thinking that he liked this life. However, that didn't mean that Michael didn't want to return to normal life, and he vowed that he would do it. But Michael didn't know how. But he knew for sure that now he would avoid the casino a kilometer away. He would reinstate himself at the institute and get back what was rightfully his. Sometimes Michael thought about Kelly, but he tried to keep thoughts of his wife, which she still was. When Michael called, she was unavailable. Well, I'll look into it. Later, he decided. After all, Kelly wasn't a needle. She'd find it. One day, on another trip to the dump, Matthews stumbled upon an old, shabby, but quite good-looking sofa made of substitute leather. Fortunately, the dump was not too far from the basement, so Michael had no problem transforming the sofa into his own. As the young vagrant breathed, the thought occurred to him that maybe there was some bedding inside the couch. But what Michael saw inside the couch nearly robbed him of his sanity. It was a suitcase full of large bills and rubles. Michael pulled out the money and his hands trembled. He counted 100 wads. And when Matthews started counting them, he couldn't hold back a sigh of disappointment. They were dolls. Only the top and bottom 10 bills were real. After all, 2,000 isn't bad either, Michael thought. It'll be enough for a lawyer to help me deal with the inheritance. There must be something to do about this Christopher. Michael did not go to any notary at that time. I mean, it was clear he'd be dealt with later. And he did. Michael Matthews was bound to survive. A couple days later, there was a knock at the basement. Who could it be? Michael thought. He froze in fear and decided not to open the door. But the knocking became more and more insistent. Open the door, police. There was a stern male voice. This was the last thing I needed. On the doorstep stood two men who looked less like policemen than anything else in the world. One of them had a big swagger and gold teeth. A man, about 30 years old, dressed in a tracksuit. Hello, Matthews replied confusedly. Hey, bro. I think you took something that doesn't belong to you, said another type. Short, full, and also in a tracksuit. Better, or rather, nicely. Took what Michael asked. Come on, shouted the first one, and kicked him in the stomach, and pushed him. A sharp pain pierced the whole body, and Michael lost consciousness. The last thing the son of the late rich man remembered. There was blood on his hand, which he involuntarily brought to his face. Ethan and Adriana smiled from their son and waved. And then the parents dissolved into the darkness and disappeared. No, whispered Michael. Mom, Dad, don't go. Waking up, he heard a painfully familiar female voice. With such a serious wound, said a surprised male voice. I thought he wouldn't make it. Michael slowly opened his eyes. Consciousness was still conceived on anesthesia, and he seriously thought that he had fallen into the next world. Where else would he meet his parents? Kelly whispered to Michael, Did you die too? No, Michael replied with a smile, rubbing his forehead with a damp cloth. I'm more alive than ever. But you? If it wasn't for a random passerby that stabbed me, you don't remember. I remember being stabbed in the stomach, and then I blacked out. I'm thirsty. You can't have one yet. Kelly shook her head. You can only look at your lips, and then you'll be examined by a doctor. What are you doing here? Michael whispered. I work as an orderly, she replied. But let's talk about that. Then you can't talk much. I wouldn't survive if anything happened to you, the young woman added in her mind. When Michael was taken to the hospital, Kelly lost the floor in the hallway. A bum was brought in again with a sigh, said the nurse Anya. Whenever I'm on shift, it's always a bum. First of all, it's a person who needs our help. A knife wound is not a joke, said James, who was nearby. So, honorable colleagues, sign it, and don't let me hear it again. He's not such a bum, said Dr. Charles after examining the patient. He has a passport. So what's he like? Matthews Michael Ethanovich. Hearing this name, Kelly ran up to the new arrival. This overgrown bum is not her husband's age, which has already brought him to this state. What if she's wrong? Can I see the passport? Kelly asked. Yes, please. Charles shrugged. I know him slowly, she mouthed. It's my husband. For 4 whole days, Michael remained unconscious. All this time, Kelly went to church and prayed for him. The young woman believed. They met for a reason. 2 days after Michael regained consciousness, he was feeling much better. Kelly had been by his side all those days. The end of April was almost summer hot. The couple sat in the hospital garden and sighed with pleasure at the enchanting scent of spring. Michael, I really couldn't have warned you then, the young woman said one day about what was tormenting her. I was doing my duty, like you. And then Christopher. Quietly, with a smile, her husband reassured her and stroked her cheek. It's all right. Let's forget about it like a bad dream. It's just a pity about the money. What money? When he told Kelly about his find at the dump, she sighed and replied, "You know, Michael, I don't think you should regret that money. It wouldn't have made you happy. That kind of money can't make a man happy at all. It has to be earned. And only in this case, money will provide a man with what he seeks: comfort, well-being, and everything else. You're so smart, you know," he said admiringly, kissing Kelly on the temple. "You're right. It's just that this money could help us." "Help us with what?" "The only thing I care about right now is getting my apartment and my business back." "You know, Kelly, it wasn't until I hit rock bottom that I realized how important this is to me. I mean, this hotel is my parents' life's work and everything. And when I found that money, I thought it was a chance." "A chance?" Sadly, she grinned. "A chance to what?" "To give up my life." It was obvious that those dolls were put there on purpose. They just didn't think anyone would put that couch to shame. "We'll figure something out about getting the apartment and the business back." "What is there to think of?" Michael sighed. "Do you have any idea how much a good lawyer costs?" "There'll be a day, there'll be food," philosophically, Kelly remarked. "Also true, Kelly." "Yeah. Do you want us to be together?" "Aya." She smiled and whispered larger than life. Michael was making a steady recovery. "Only where to go after the hospital. You can live with me in the outhouse," Kelly said. "I don't think James would mind. It's not a 5-room suite, but it's still a roof over your head. Not a basement on the outskirts of town," he chuckled. And the couple laughed merrily. Kelly continued to work as a nurse, and Michael took a job as a handyman. Not the limit of dreams, but the young people believed that everything would be fine. But the Matthews couple were wrong. What awaited them next was simply wonderful. In the evening, when Michael was resting after work, Kelly was about to return from her shift. A policeman came to the outhouse, and William, the Matthews family lawyer. "So this is where you're hiding, Michael Ethanovich," the lawyer said cheerfully. "I've done something." He asked in surprise. "You didn't. But Christopher, aka Igor, is on a bender," said the policeman. "He got caught in another scam. And the investigation came to the case of the death of your parents, as well as the case of your apartment. And then there's more. They found the perpetrator who set up your parents' car accident. In general, Michael Etchanovich, you have a real chance to get back your legal inheritance." The man smiled. "And we can live in my parents' apartment." Not believing his happiness, Michael asked. William looked questioningly at the policeman, and he answered, "At the moment, your parents' apartment is sealed, but after the trial, you can move in. So you'll have to stay here for a week." "Hello." Kelly greeted the men as they entered. "What's up?" "Everything is great," Michael exclaimed. The policeman, whose name was Liam, handed them their summonses, and the guests turned away. "So what's the matter?" Kelly asked. "The point is that your godfather will get what he deserves," her husband proclaimed cheerfully, and surrounded her across the room. "Put me in my place," with courtly severity, said the young woman. "You are not allowed yet. Better tell me the details." "Yes, with pleasure." The trial went off without a hitch. The swindler got 8 years, and then the Matthews couple, thanked James profusely, moved into Michael's parents' apartment. "Nothing's changed," he commented, "but we should check to make sure that the spirit of this Christopher is not here." Kelly grimaced, and seeing his silver lighter on the table, ostentatiously tossed it into the trash. After all the trials that fell to their share, spouses Matthews decided to get married. The sacrament of marriage took place a month after the triumphant return to the apartment. "Which church should we choose?" Michael asked his wife. "I think the answer is obvious." Kelly smiled. "The one at the hospital." The whole hospital staff was invited to the wedding, admiring the beautiful couple and genuinely happy that their hardships were behind them. "Maybe we could go to a restaurant," Michael suggested. "I would love to, but work is not waiting." James replied with sincere regret. "Is it true?" said, "We're short-staffed, so we're working weekends. So the guys will notice another time," smiled Matthews. Then we invite everyone to the new year. But we still have to live till the new year, grinned the head doctor. But thank you for the invitation. On the way home, the couple bought a bottle of wine and ordered dinner at a restaurant. Michael and Kelly sat on the loggia and with tenderness, looking at each other, savoring Serbian pomegranate wine. I look at the stars and remember my parents, Michael confessed to his wife. And I, too, with a sigh responded to the death of my parents cannot be called worthy. But they did not stop being my parents. Back at the hospital, Kelly told him about her real parents, and it brought them even closer together. It couldn't be otherwise. There were no secrets between them now. I think that both my parents and your parents are looking down on us from heaven and rejoicing, Michael said, taking her hand in his. Kelly looked at her husband with gratitude and tears, and happiness glistened in her eyes. Michael entered into the rights of inheritance. He was reinstated in the institute and now combined his studies and work. In addition to an apartment and a country hotel, parents left the young a substantial sum of money, and the need to work in the hospital was no longer necessary. The couple often visited James and the other employees, who were always happy to see them. Kelly was also planning to reinstate herself at the institute, but it looked like that would have to wait. An incomplete course, the dean said. So I can't help you. The young woman was upset, but after a few days she learned that there was nothing to grieve about. We are going to have a child, said Kelly Michael, who at that time was sitting at the lecture. Olenka, it's true, shouted he absent-mindedly, forgetting where he was. The professor looked disapprovingly at the Matthews student, and Michael smiled disarmingly. I'm sorry, Matvey Semyonovich, he said. It's just that I just found out that I'm going to be a father. Well, congratulations, smiled involuntarily back at the professor. But please keep your voice down. All right, Michael assured him. Everything that had happened to him had completely changed his life. From that moment, Michael felt really grown up and strong. Long ago, his grandmother used to say that all trials are given to a person for something. Michael didn't understand it at that time because of his young age. But now he's a 20-year-old man who does. He and Kelly had to go through what they went through. Otherwise, they wouldn't have realized they needed each other. No, with an obscenely happy smile, Michael was thinking, barely catching on to what the professor was saying. We don't just need each other. We're made for each other. The story of their acquaintance could not be called romantic, and what happened next was more like a fairy tale. So what? At least they're doing great now. After all, they say the harder it rains, the brighter the sun will shine. 8 months from now, a bundle of helium and pink-colored balloons soared into the sky, and people standing in the courtyard of the maternity hospital shouted hooray for good luck. May he grow up healthy. Michael held his newborn daughter in his arms and felt like the king of the world. But Kelly, holding a giant bouquet of roses, smiled and felt like the happiest and most beloved woman in the world. Come and see us again, the midwife said with a smile. The woman, who had delivered more than 100 babies, spoke the usual memorized words. But those words seemed to be addressed exclusively to them. We will, the young father declared. And we will do it more than once. Really, my favorite, of course, smiled Kelly. And the employee of the maternity hospital, in turn, thought that these two really visit here, and more than once. An inability to say no and a lack of determination had always been Michael Matthews' weaknesses, and it was strange because his parents achieved a lot in life just because they did not suffer from any of these things. Or perhaps the whole point was just that nature had rested on the son. Michael's parents were successful and wealthy people. They had a family business, a country hotel. Regardless of the season, there were always plenty of people wanting to stay at the hotel. That's why the Matthews business was booming. The business took up almost all of Ethan and Adriana's free time, and as it often happens in such cases, the boy almost never saw his parents. That didn't mean the boy was on his own. Not at all. Even before school, Michael's life was scheduled not by days, but by hours. English courses, public speaking, computer literacy, swimming pool, fencing, golf. This is not a complete list of courses and sections where the ever-busy parents determine their only heir. Michael faithfully went to one course. But more often than not, it happened that the boy Anna needed and gave. What's the matter? Adriana was invariably interested. Yes, but not interested. From the edges of the martyr grimace answered the son. I see, nonchalantly nodded the parent. After that, he would surf the internet for some new courses, and after a while, everything was repeated again. One day, Michael rebelled. You asked me what I wanted for once, but I'm not interested in your public speaking and yoga. Adriana gasped. But you're the son of some of the town's most respected people. Dad and I want you to be a well-rounded man. You know, well-rounded. Did you go to any of this stuff yourself before we became successful? Michael grinned crookedly. I don't have time to socialize with my friends, and they look at me like I'm an idiot. No, look at him. His mother shook her hands. No time to hang out with friends, you say. That's good. There won't be time for nonsense. Ethan, but say something. What can I say? My husband sighed. Our son has grown up to be an ungrateful man. We pay a lot of money for our son to become an interesting and cultured man, and he still turns his face away. He's not interested, you see. Have you ever said what you want? Anyway, the conversation went nowhere. Michael had an ally in Adriana's maternal grandmother. Cindy thought that such a number of sections and other, as she said, rubbish was unthinkable for a teenager. You're just taking away a boy's childhood. More than once said Cindy, but her words, apparently, were for her daughter and son-in-law an empty sound. And then 7th grader Michael went to extreme measures. One day he didn't come to school. That day the class teacher did not pay attention to his absence. But when Michael didn't show up the next day, Christina called Adriana and asked what was wrong. What do you mean he hasn't been here for 2 days? She was stunned. Where is he then? But it is you who should know where your son is, Christina replied with a faint chuckle. Michael has not attended school for the 2nd day. That's what I'm asking you. What's wrong? You're asking me what's wrong, Adriana exclaimed angrily. You're a classroom teacher, and you get paid for it. But you know, Adriana resented the class teacher. With all due respect, you're wrong now. I get paid for classroom management and teaching discipline. But what happens outside the school, is on the shoulders of the parents. Michael left home and went anywhere but school. But how, pray tell? I should know where your son went. Adriana, for all her authoritarian ways, could admit when she was wrong. I'm sorry, Christina, she said. You're absolutely right. It's just not every day that you find out that your son is absent from school for a 2nd day. Yes, I understand. The class teacher softened. Thank you. Of course I'll take action. And Adriana, none of my business, of course. But meanwhile, Michael walked around the city, reveling in his freedom. Of course, he knew that when his parents found out, they'd make a big fuss. So what? Michael sincerely believed that the game was worth it, and let them shout not as a gimmick. The main thing is that the ancestors finally understood. He, Michael Matthews, would only do what he was interested in. In the evening, when his parents came home from work, he watched TV. I wonder if Marisha had already reported Michael to them. She probably did. Hi, Adriana said in a friendly voice. Hi, a little warily replied the son, puzzled. Don't they know anything yet? However, Michael, I got a call from Christina today, but now it's going to start doom. He thought and sighed heavily. But strangely enough, neither mother nor father were in any mood for scandal. Quite the opposite. Michael, do you know what your trouble is? Adriana asked. You don't know how to speak. No, learn, or you'll have a hard time. We wanted what was best for you, but you don't talk. So I thought you were fine with it. Yeah, well, that's fine. We're our own people, but you're gonna have a lot of people in your life. And if you let everyone ride on you, you won't last long. Learn to stand your ground. Michael nodded. He wondered why his mother had brought it up. And his father, instead of giving him a good beating, had chosen to remain silent. He had some thoughts, though. Christina had brainwashed the mother, too. She loved it. Michael mentally thanked the class teacher and took note of his mother's words. But unfortunately, to say no never learned. And it was this shortcoming that influenced his fate in a bad way. As for the lack of purposefulness, then here the parents were partly to blame. Michael had no idea what he wanted from life, and all because his parents planned his son's life for many years ahead. Parents programmed it. Michael does what he's told. After that incident, Michael returned to school safely. He studied without much enthusiasm. Thank God, at least they're off the hook with clubs, courses, sections. Study. After school, you'll enter the hotel business department, and it would be good to enroll in courses on the basics of entrepreneurship. You're going to continue the family business. My mom and I will give you some pointers, of course. But life doesn't stand still. Michael mentally scolded himself for his inability to say no, but in the end, he decided that his father was talking business because he really will inherit the family business, which means he has to learn how to run it. And do I want to do business? The teenager thought about it and decided that rather no than yes. More precisely so, with his character would be worth trying himself in something else. But here's the thing. Tried a great many different directions. Michael never realized what he was interested in. No wonder. He didn't go there of his own free will. That's one. And when after training in the pool you gallop to the English course, then you take a public speaking class at the same pace. Nothing is interesting except a warm, soft bed. After a hot dinner and a cup of tea, that's two. And after high school, Michael enrolled in hotel management. And what's most interesting, he liked it very much. So maybe with business everything will not be so hopeless. He thought happily. The main thing is to be passionate about it. His parents, of course, were over the moon. Now they were sure the business would be in good hands. The guy was keen on studying, did not drink, did not smoke, not to mention anything else. Basically, he was on the right track, and that's half of success. But half. In his third year, Michael fell in love for the first time. Of course, there were kindergarten and then school hotties.